What's up, everybody? How's it going? I'm Brad Dollar, producer, engineer, and coach. Thank you so much for joining me. It's great to see you. When it comes to mixing, there are so many questions that every artist, producer, and creator has about how to maximize the process and help our songs sound as great as they possibly can. One element that I constantly see being discussed and asked questions about is reverb. This classic effect can be found on pretty much everything that has an audio processor, from your phone to your mixer, and of course to your digital audio workstation. But just because it's there, it doesn't mean that it automatically sounds good or that we really know what to do with it for any given song. So in this video, I'm going to show you 3 tricks that will help you to mix reverb into your song easier, faster, and with more focus so that you can articulate your musical vision as clearly and easily as possible. But before we get started, it would mean a lot to me if you could hit the like button and the subscribe button, as that helps the YouTube algorithm to know I even exist and to bring this information to more artists and creators just like yourself. It really helps out the channel and it means a lot to me. So thanks so much for doing that. Without further ado, let's go. All right, so here we are in Pro Tools, getting ready to show you a little more about these tricks. You may recognize this song from the subtractive equalization video, which if you haven't watched, be sure to check out, also a helpful tip. But since it's already set up, let's just save some time and dive right back into this one and use it as our example for these reverb tricks. First things first, like any song, I'll just play a little bit so you know what's going on.
Can't run away from yourself, hey. Can't run away from yourself, no, no. No matter how you try, well, you can't run away, hey.
So the first thing with reverb is, of course, to add the reverb. In this scenario, in this example, we have 3 reverbs going. We have a short, a medium, and a super long. We'll talk more about how to combine all of those and how to use those efficiently in a moment. But for right now, let's just go ahead and get some reverb on the track. Now, typically when I'm mixing, when I'm trying to decide on a reverb, this isn't really one of the tricks, it's just a bonus. I like to send whatever the track is to all of the reverbs. Then I can play around and figure out which one I want to use. So when I start mixing, I go ahead and send a little bit of the track to each reverb unit I have so that I can decide which one works best for the song. And that's what I'm doing right now. Okay, so now that we have a send from each of our tracks going to the reverbs, we'll be able to hear the reverb itself actually happening, and we can dive into these tricks that will make your mixes sound better. Okay, so really quickly, just for reference, here's what the track sounds like now with some reverb on it. It's probably gonna be too much, but we'll get to that in a second.
Can't run away from yourself, hey. Can't run away from yourself, no, no. No matter how you try, well, you can't run away, hey. Can't run away.
So immediately, it's clear that a lot of the impact and a lot of the presence in the song has now been softened. The song has also now gotten a little washy, and if we add any more elements to it, it's going to become muddy and messy really quickly. So one of the very first tricks that we can do to reverb to make it actually stand out and not muddy up our track is to EQ it. Now, reverb equalization can take on all kinds of different forms and functions. You can put on a graphic EQ and carve out little chunks here and there. You can put on a very classic vintage EQ like an API or a Neve and do really big boosts and cuts and be very musical about it. All of that works. But for now, let's just start with doing a filter on the reverb in order to move some of the muck out of the way. My favorite kind of filter to use on a reverb is a high-pass filter. And what a high-pass filter does is allows only the highs to pass, or in other words, it cuts the lows. When we add a filter to the end of our reverb, it clears up a lot of the lower frequencies that can come from a track and go into a reverb. And once they start to echo and delay, they can build up and become really, really messy. If you've ever heard a deep, loud sound in a big empty room, you know the low end fills up a lot of space and it goes on for a long time. Fool of a took. So if a little bit of low end from a vocal or from a drum or from a guitar ends up going to the reverb, it's going to create more of that mud that we don't really want. So if we add a filter to the end of the reverb chain, it'll clean all of that up, but it will still excite the reverb with a lot of that amplitude and a lot of that energy that might come from the low end, but we just won't have to hear it and have it interfere with the rest of the stuff we're mixing. So let's do that really quickly. My favorite EQ to do this is usually going to be a stock EQ, whether it's Pro Tools or it's Ableton, but you can use whatever you like. All we're looking to do is to add a high pass filter, and that's this little gal. You've seen it a lot. And we're just going to roll it down to 100 to start. Now, it's very important with filtering to actually listen to what you're filtering as you do it. I know from experience that probably isn't a lot below 100 that we really want, so I'm going to go ahead and start there. But if you want to hear what it sounds like down in the 20, 60 hertz range, and maybe there's some deeper sense in your track that you need to make sure you have a lot of reverb, you can go ahead and keep it a little lower. But let's start at 100 so you can hear what's going on. Firstly, we'll bypass it. We'll put it in. We'll take it higher. And then And let's make sure we do it on all the reverbs since we're sending to each of them. I went pretty aggressive and I went up to 260 Hertz. That's probably too much, but I just want to make sure that you can hear this. So let's check it out. Bypass. Unbypass. You can tell that right away when you add the filter into the reverb, you get a nice lift to the track. You actually hear a little more perceived brightness, and a lot of that thickness that was maybe clouding it and making it seem fuzzy is just gone. So that's really the power of the filter. It's a very subtle change, but when you have a lot of tracks going to a lot of different reverbs and you start to get all these frequencies building up, it can very, very quickly make it so your mix gets out of hand. So the first trick I really suggest trying is throwing a filter at the end of your reverbs in order to mellow out all the low end that may be building up and causing a lot of muck. And really quickly, it's worth noting that this trick also works in the opposite. So if you like all the low end going to the reverb, but the high end is too crispy and too bright, you can also roll off the high end to clear up more of that space as well. So that's your first reverb trick. The next really easy way to add more focus and clarity to the reverb you add to your songs is to actually spread out the reverb more. One of my favorite ways to do this is by using stereo width adjusters. The concept here is that instead of having all the reverb happen in the natural stereo listening space, we're going to spread it out a little further. We're going to push it out a little further using some perceived psychoacoustics and processing. By doing this, you actually make the reverb a little more obvious, which can bring a little more character to a song, but it also creates more space in the center of the mix. So things like vocals, lead instruments, and anything else that's kind of happening around here in the stereo field just has more presence and impact without losing the reverb, which is a very hard thing to do unless you use some sort of stereo processing like this. So let's try it out. I'm actually using the Kilohertz stereo plugin. This is a free plugin. You can get it online. It's a great one. It can go very, very wide, almost too extreme. So you should definitely play with this and be very careful with it. Most stereo wideners and other sources can create weird phase issues, but with time-based effects, you can get away with doing a little more of that smear because you do want some extra space and filtering happening out there, which creates a more engaging listening experience anyways. So let's go ahead and try adding some stereo width to the end of the reverb. And you could do this before or after that filter we just talked about. You can do it in lieu of the filter or with it, whatever you want to do. Both work very well in conjunction and do different things. So up to you. Let's try it. Here we go. So here's the track without any width processing on the reverbs.
Can't run away from yourself. Ay, can't run away from yourself. No, no. No matter how.
Okay, now I'm gonna be pretty extreme with it here. And I'm just gonna copy these so we can really hear it. Okay, here it is bypassed.
Can't run away from yourself. Ay, can't run away from yourself.
Unbypassed.
No matter how you try, well, you can't run away. Ooh, ay, can't run away from yourself. No, you can't. Well, you can't run away from yourself. No, you can't. No matter how you try, you can't run away.
That's pretty extreme. That really pushes the reverb out and makes it very obvious. So if you were trying to be subtle with your reverb, you want to be very careful with this tool and maybe just do a smaller percentage of it. But let's just roll it back a little bit. I like a lot of it. I think it sounds good and it's good for you to hear the examples. But let's just hear what it's like when it's a little more subtle. So let's just roll it down to about half of where it was. And I'm just going to copy it here. Okay, and let's start with the bypassed.
Can't run away from yourself. Ay, can't run away from yourself. No, no. No matter how you try, well, you can't run away.
Unbypassed.
Ay, can't run away from yourself. No, you can't. Well, you can't run away from
Bypass.
yourself. No, you can't. No matter how you try, you can't run away.
Unbypass. So that's a lot more subtle and probably more useful overall. But having that range and such a huge amount of flexibility to really explore all the space in the stereo field is so empowering and brings a ton of clarity to your mix when you start to use that space. It's very easy for effects to get locked in mono and for them to feel stereo, but for them to not actually have any stereo action. So when you add any sort of width processing or stereo-based modulation after a reverb, you really help to wake it up and create more of the immersive experience that we get from reverb in real life. If you go into a big empty room, the reverb feels like it's all around you, not just in front of you. And that's the goal here. So this second trick is a really quick and easy way to add more clarity to your mixes. And you can play with the ratios and see the kind of impact it actually has on what you're doing. So stereo width tool after your reverb to increase clarity and help the reverb get deeper into the stereo field, which makes the entire listening experience that much better. Okay, and the third and final reverb trick I have for you today is maybe one that probably you've been thinking I should be doing this entire time, and that's to blend the reverbs that you're using. Far too often, we put way too much pressure on one reverb to do all of the work. We want it to be long and short and deep and enveloping and to fill up all of the space like the real world. But that's just not how great mixes come together. Sometimes if it's very intimate, there's only one or two elements, having a single reverb is totally fine. But a lot of the tracks that we love that create that very deep, engaging experience, they have several different reverbs happening all at once, blended together to create that space. When it comes to blending multiple reverbs, there's really no wrong answer. It's just about listening to the song you're actually working on and making decisions that actually serve it. Sometimes shorter reverbs work and sometimes they don't. Sometimes longer, infinite reverbs are exactly what you need, and other times, not at all. So really listen deeply to the song and don't expect one formula to always work. Make sure that you're blending your reverb to each song you're working on so that you create something that's very personal to the music and embellishes what's actually there versus just some textbook answer you put into your mix hoping it would work. So really quickly, let me show you how I like to blend reverb. First and foremost, I actually like to start with them all down. And this will help me to really discover what each reverb is doing and decide how much interplay I want between each one. I typically like to start from small and go up to large, but you can do it in any order you like. In this case, we're just gonna go very linearly, short, medium, long, and blend them in tastefully to help this song be as great as it can be. Here we go.
Can't run away from yourself, hey, can't run away from yourself, no, no. No matter
So I start turning it up, and as soon as I hear it, I stop.
can't run away from yourself, hey, can't run away from yourself, no, no. No matter how you
Second reverb, this is the medium reverb.
hey, can't run away from yourself, no you can't, well you can't run away from yourself, no you can't. No matter how you try, you can't run away.
You can hear that one's a little brighter with a longer tail.
Can't run away,
It's maybe a little too messy for how fast the song is.
no, no. No matter how you try, well you
And then the third reverb, which is the very long one.
can't run away from yourself, hey, can't run away from yourself, no, no. No matter how you try, well you can't run away. Hey, can't run away from yourself, no you can't, well you can't run away from yourself, no you can't. No matter how you try, you can't run away.
Okay, and then let's just listen back and hear how that sounds with fresh ears.
Can't run away from yourself, hey, can't run away from yourself, no, no. No matter how you try, well you can't run away. Hey.
I like that. Now I'm going to change the ratio just a little bit because I think that the third reverb, the long reverb, is maybe feeling a little too much like a delay, and I want a little more of that shorter reverb up front. So now that I know what they all sound like and I've heard them start to enter the track, I'm going to play with the bounces a little more extreme to make one a lead, put one in the middle, and then tuck one in. Here we go.
Can't run away from yourself, hey, can't run away from yourself, no, no. No matter how you try, well you can't run away. Hey, can't run away from yourself, no you can't, well you can't run away from yourself, no you can't. No matter how
Yeah, it's definitely about that shorter reverb for this track. And that has a lot to do with the tempo of the song. As tempos get faster, you want to put more emphasis on the shorter reverbs. And as tempos get slower, you can put more emphasis on the longer reverbs. So with this song, I'm really feeling that shorter reverb because it creates that space and depth, but it doesn't get in the way as much. I do like that medium reverb. I think that the longer tail is nice, but it is a little messy. This might be really nice to goose up when there's quieter verses in the arrangement. And then the third reverb is just a little too long for this track, but it's nice to have in there and kind of give you that floating heavens feel that's tucked in. And if I'm going to take this particular example a little bit further, I want to go back to that second reverb trick and add a little more of that stereo width tool to the main reverb we selected, the shorter one, just to push it out a little further. And then since that longer reverb is really tucked in, let's just go maxed out. Let's just go as far as we can, left and right. If it's going to be blended in any ways, let's at least give it some space to live on its own. So let's hear what that sounds like.
can't run away from yourself, hey, can't run away from yourself, no, no. No matter how you try, well you can't run away. Hey, can't run away from yourself, no you can't.
Yeah, that sounded nice. That's sounding more like the reverbs that we're used to hearing. It's sounding more like a finished mix. And just for fun, here it is with no reverb.
Can't run away from yourself, hey, can't run away from yourself, no, no. No matter how you try, well you
Reverb.
can't run away. Hey, can't run away from yourself, no you can't, well you can't run away from yourself, no you can't. No matter how you try, you can't run away.
Yeah, the reverb just adds so much energy to the song. I love it. It really fills it out. And actually, because this is kind of an unmixed track and everything's not very bright and could use a little more life to it, the brighter reverb actually lifts the whole track. And with the filters in and the stereo width tool, these very simple stock reverb settings all of a sudden wake the song up and make it feel like the exciting listening experience that we really wanted to feel like. So that's your third reverb trick to help your mixes come together quicker, easier, and more like you imagined in the first place. Okay, so just to recap, your 3 reverb tricks that are going to help bring clarity to your mix and help you articulate your vision clearer and faster are to put a filter after your reverb in order to roll out some low end or some high end, your choice, in order to bring more space to the track. Your second trick is to add stereo width to spread the reverb out and take up more of that beautiful stereo space that you have to use. And your third trick is to blend your reverbs and to not put all the pressure on one reverb to do all the lifting. Instead, pick a short, a medium, and a long reverb, for example, and blend them together to taste for the track to create one new reverb sound that's really signature to you and the song you're working on. So I hope this was helpful. If you have reverb tricks that you like to use, I'd love to hear them. Please drop them in the comments. Let's check them out. And if you have questions that you want to know about mixing, or if you have more questions about reverb and delay, definitely let me know. I'd love to help you and make some videos for you. Thank you so much for watching. Be sure to follow me at Brad K. Dollar on social. Hit like and subscribe so we can stay in touch. And I look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks so much. See you soon.